Hi, everyone. I'm going to introduce you to Kate, and I am actually very excited to have this interview today because in my reading and perusing of the Reddit forum, there are a lot of same-sex couples who are frustrated with the fertility system and how it doesn't work for them. I'm grateful here to have Kate to talk to us about her journey with her partner to have a baby, and we're going to hear more about this and put this out into the world so we can change things. Welcome, Kate.
Hello.
So take me back in time when you and your partner decided you guys wanted a baby, and tell me everything that kind of happened along the way, and I'll pepper you with questions and we'll flesh things out.
Perfect. So let's see. I think I had just turned 40, and my partner and I had been together for about 6 years, and we were at the point where we both knew that we wanted to have kids or a child. And it was like we went into COVID and, and the world shut down, and it actually provided us with the opportunity to pursue artificial insemination at home. And so I did a lot of research on Facebook and on Google on how to do artificial insemination at home. I thought, I've had regular periods, I'm in good health. Like I knew that things looked good for me reproductive wise. And so we just chose a sperm donor and had some sperm delivered to the house and turkey basted away. And I thought,
I got to
this
tell
is
you,
easy.
I was reading on Reddit that there was another woman posting about her experience with her partner, and she was joking about the turkey baster and how ineffective it is.
It's ineffective. We got like a special, syringe, which we probably paid way too much money for. So we did the first round at home. I didn't really know, right? I just like did an ovulation test and like, okay, I ovulated. And then, we did the insemination, and I waited 2 weeks, and period came, and I was like, okay, we just try again, right? We bought 10 vials of sperm. So we had plenty to work with. And the second round came, and I had read up a little bit more about like the timing and how many hours after the peak of your ovulation. And we inseminated again, and no pregnancy. And at that point, I realized like there's a little bit too much science involved here. And I'm not willing to use up all of our sperm. So I'm gonna reach out to a fertility specialist. And so we reached out to a fertility specialist and went through all of the rigmarole of testing. And there was there was no discrimination. There was a lot of understanding of like wanting same-sex couple wanting to have children. But it didn't feel like there was a lot of information out there, right? Like even the insurance companies are behind the ball, right? And so, my diagnosis was like a diminished ovarian reserve, which some of that was my age.
Did you have low AMH and the high FSH at that point?
Nope.
Okay.
I did not. I was in a good, when I started, I think I was at like I had the eggs of a 33-year-old. Right? So
Okay.
they were younger than I was, apparently. But there was a lot to go through, right? We had to go through a psychological evaluation, both my partner and I. Which we had to pay out of pocket for. And
was that for sperm?
Whenever you're doing fertility, anything with a donor gamete, at least in the state of Connecticut, you need to have like get the check from a psychologist. And then I needed to have some counseling. So I had genetic testing done. I was a carrier for 4 genetic diseases that I could pass on to a child. So I then then I had to find a donor. So the donor that we'd bought 10 vials of sperm from was not a match for me because we didn't know if he was a carrier for the genetic diseases that I was carrier for. So I had to find, so that really narrowed down the pool. So we had to choose again. That, drew out the process about 4 or 5 months. And we decided, okay, I'm healthy, everything looks good. And so we went through IUI, and we went through about 3 rounds of IUI. And I realized I'm not getting any younger. And each vial is like one shot, right? Like I responded well to all of it. But no dice, didn't get pregnant. And so I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to screw around anymore. Like, let's just go through IVF, which I had said, when we first started on the journey, I was like, if we don't get pregnant with either at home insemination or IUI, we're not going to do IVF. That's crazy. I'm not doing that. And then we got to that point and I was like, well, we're in it. Like, what's IVF? So we just jumped in, and thankfully I had really good insurance. And that was a real blessing.
Do you think, looking back at that experience, that you just wished you could have moved into IVF, that IUI, it's like you need a certain amount of money to keep buying sperm. It's not,
it's not cheap. And the sperm prices kept going up. Right. So, our first few vials that we got, and we had to like trade in vials. So there was like buyback, and that was a little bit stressful. But yeah, I mean, I wish that someone had just said, based on your age, even though maybe I would have tried IUI once. We were given the information that like there would maybe be more surefire way, right? Doing IVF. But going back, I wish that I had an idea of like how long it was going to take, and what were some of the barriers we were going to come up against. I was not informed of that. And I don't think that had anything to do with being part of the LGBT community. I didn't have all of the information, and I started to learn as I went along. And I think probably the doctor was like learning as we were going along, right? Everything looked great on the scans and in my blood work, but I wasn't ending up pregnant. And so when I did my first egg retrieval, I responded very well to the medication. We got 4 viable eggs out of that first retrieval. And we got 2 embryos out of that cycle. And both of those embryos were abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, we decided to take a little bit more of an aggressive route. I started to work with you, get everything right. Like we wanted to do all the things that we could possibly do. I changed my diet. I was just doing everything that I possibly could.
Yeah, I think at this point too, if I'm remembering the time that we were together, you were so on top of tightening up diet, yoga, meditation. You had a whole bunch of supplements. You also addressed chemicals in your home environment, in soaps, laundry detergent, no perfume, like house sprays. And so from my perspective, you really stepped in and you were like, I'm going to do everything I can to improve my egg quality.
Yes.
And these are all the different components that I can control.
Yes. I think it was a second retrieval. It may have been my first retrieval with you. And I did the trigger, and I went in for my blood work before going in for a retrieval, only to find out that I ovulated through.
Yes.
And so a whole cycle, right? I'd gone through all the steps of that cycle. Like nobody prepared me. And when they said, oh yeah, it's like 1% of people this happens to. So we're going to be aggressive next time, and we're going to put you on a different medication. And that was a lot. right? Like I wasn't prepared for that level of disappointment because I just thought like we were gonna go through it, right?
And I think too, when you hear a woman say, I ovulated through through an IVF cycle, I don't think, if you haven't had the experience of doing IVF, you don't understand the amount of pressure and buildup.
That's
And
right.
then to have, run the marathon, but you can't run the last leg.
Yes, that's exactly it.
It is really disappointing.
Yeah,
And
it
to
is.
feel like
It's
you're like, oh
bizarre.
shit, I have to do this over again.
The clinic shut down, right?
Oh yes,
For
they're
like,
cleaning, their
yeah.
annual cleaning.
So it was like I had to wait another 3 months, right? So we were like, okay, I'm just going to focus on all the things that I can control, right?
Yep.
We're going to do all the things. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to get acupuncture every week. We're going to focus on improving egg quality, minimizing stress.
I want to say you were tenacious.
I was tenacious.
Holy smokes, folks. Kate left
Yeah.
no rock unturned.
Yeah.
You were
I was drinking that
determined.
horrible muddy herb.
Yes. Chinese herbs. Dirt tea.
Dirt tea. Yeah. That's right. I think I might still have some. Yeah, it was right. I was committed. I was like, we are in this. We're gonna do this. I was reading all of the books. I was doing all of the things. And so when we went, for the next round, and then the round after that, and the round after that, right? It was every single time, for sure, there was an improvement, right? I would either see that I had more follicles,
And
right?
didn't you notice too, if I'm remembering correctly, your embryo quality on day 5 started to get better.
Oh yeah.
You were having more cells, more high quality cells in those
When
embryos.
Yeah, we were definitely seeing an improvement, right? The fertility doctor was telling me that we were having the improvement, right? But all the embryos that would come back from genetic testing were not viable. We went through that first, 10 vials of sperm pretty quickly, or it felt pretty quickly, but we know that it wasn't. And we decided, you know what, we're gonna try again. And so that meant that the donor that we had already chosen, they were sold out. So then I had to go through it again, right? Find another genetic match, get another donor. At this point, prices had gone up again. I don't know. I think I got another 3 or 5 vials.
How many vials do they use for an IVF cycle?
1.
So do you think, looking back on all of that, if you did it over, you would buy a bunch of sperm, really have
Yeah.
enough on stock, with the idea that you might need to do multiple cycles?
I mean, I would have liked to have known much earlier that my egg quality wasn't great, right? I would have started much sooner. All the things that as I was finding them out, like through the process, and to no one's fault, right? Like that was just how it happened.
Right.
But in retrospect, we had purchased, 10 vials of sperm, and I had known, I've got these genetic, I'm a carrier for these genetic diseases, or, so I want to, if I'm going to buy stock in all of the sperm, I want it to be the right stuff.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot I didn't realize at the time, right? The wait, the 8-week wait to transfer the vials to get the new donor, or to order more sperm, and then it has to be in quarantine, and then you have to, have it shipped. All of that takes time, and I am not getting any younger. You hear straight couples who are getting the advice of like, you just need to relax, go on vacation, just have fun. And that wasn't an option for us, right? We couldn't just like go relax, and have a glass of wine and go on vacation and just try naturally. That was never an option. And so there was almost like this pressure of, we have to find the right donor, right? We have to find the donor that's going to like meet our our desires of like what the other half of the genetic makeup of our child will be, but also we need to make sure that we're not like putting a child at risk with other genetic diseases. The LGBT community is a large community, but the community of people who are that the LGBT community who are trying to have a baby is small, right? And so, and we are limited. Right. So it's either, you get an unknown donor, you get a known donor. You're either doing at-home insemination, you're doing, IUI, or you're doing IVF. Or you're doing surrogacy. And that's not really viable for
For
people,
a
right? Like
lot.
for everyone. What I would find I had a few close friends who I would talk to about this, the disappointment that I was feeling, and they could empathize certainly with the disappointment I felt at the end of every cycle, right? Getting the news that my embryos weren't viable, right, or that they were abnormal. They could empathize with that, but there was also like, well, why don't you have your wife try? Or why don't you just find a new donor? Or why don't you just adopt, right? That they don't realize that it adds another layer. We knew that I was going to be the carrier, and we were going to use my eggs for a reason. That was really important. And yes, there are other options out there, but there's not a lot of guidance. And so, and I don't know that
I
there's
think it's
many.
I think it's interesting that they want you to have a psychological uh, uh, session to make sure you're prepared for sperm donor. But then there's all these other issues going on and around trying to make these really big decisions. It's kind of like, oh, well, you're on your own.
Right. Right. And a lot of that like psychological evaluation was a conversation. I didn't feel like I was being evaluated, but a lot of that was like, how are you going to tell your child like where they came from? When will you start telling them that? Like it was those types of questions which are important, but there was no conversation around what do you do when you run out of sperm? Right? Like, what do you do when you realize, your eggs are not going to bring a biological child? And like, are you prepared? Are you prepared for the possibility of embryo donation or egg donation? Right? There's not that conversation. And I think that would have been helpful as we navigated through, even if it wasn't an intense conversation, but an awareness, right? All of that research I did on my own. When we got to the point where we had exhausted all of our sperm, right? My wife and I had a conversation of like, okay, well, we can't afford egg donation because that's outrageously expensive. And we'd have to buy the sperm on top of it. So it's like double the cost. Okay, so what about embryo donation? Well, that market is pretty cornered with like, for married cisgender, straight folk. There are embryo donation services that pair you, but it's also very expensive. Then there's the conversation of like, if we go through with embryo donation, then our children, the child that I would carry, would have full siblings. And that wasn't something that, when we originally started talking about having children, what how we navigate that. We knew we would have donor siblings, possibly, unless we bought all of the sperm. So there were conversations that we learned that we might have to have as the process. And I think one of the questions that really came up for the both of us was, is this about us wanting to have children, or is this about us wanting to give a loving home to a child, whether that child is biologically connected to us or not? Is it about us? And the answer for myself was like it was a little bit of both. And so for me, the idea of going to foster or to adoption, I didn't want it to come from a selfish place. Like I didn't want that child to fill a void within me. I wanted, and that's very different. It's very different, the idea of like adopting a child and the idea of having your own child.
One of the components of dealing with infertility is that couples put a lot of thought into what does it mean for us to have a baby, have a child? What does it look like? What are the family going to be like? How are we going to interact with each other? There's a lot of thought that goes into it. The thought process that fertility couples go through. I think that they are more clear in who they want to be as a parent.
Yeah, it's very intentional. It's
Yes,
very
that's the
intentional.
word,
Yeah,
intentional. Yes.
it's very intentional. I think like, and you don't realize how much intention you have until you are going through the process and you're going through it multiple times. And you're navigating the hormones and you're navigating, the weight gain and you're navigating the disappointment and not just your own, right? Like I was the person who was receiving all the injections. I was the person who was going through all of these procedures. I was the person who was like getting the phone calls and going in for the blood work. But, my wife went through her own level of disappointment and her own level of like research. How do we navigate this? And I think you see it, right? Like couples will either, really bond together through it, or it can really break you because you become so fixated. It is your life, right? You're looking at, a deli sandwich and you're like, oh, well, if I have this, is this gonna, decrease my egg quality because of the nitrates and the mayonnaise and the, right, like all of the things that you never thought of. It becomes all consuming when you're waiting for your blood tests to come back, right? You're looking when you go in for your scans, how many follicles do I have? How big are they? And so the person who's going through that has their own experience, but then the partner who's what, and I think this is true of same sex and straight couples, that the person who's not like going through all of those procedures, they have their own experience that they're navigating, and there really are not a ton of resources out there to
There's very
support
little.
it. There's very
Very
little.
little.
There's very little. And I think there's a grief that happens, that that
Totally.
when you're in it, right? When we're like, okay, we got 5 more vials of sperm, we got 4 more vials of sperm, we've got, right, like it's just going to get better, we're going to do this. You have this hope that's keeping you going and motivating you, even though you're all hormonal. Don't
Totally.
know
And
if
I,
you
I
can do
also,
it.
I mean, my personal thought is that the hormones also escalate the desire to have a child.
So much
It,
so.
it, it's like it triggers parts of your brain to even desire it more. And so
Mhm.
then it enhances it.
It's really intense.
So how many IVF cycles did you do in the end? Because I don't remember. Was it like 9?
I think it was yeah, I think it was 8 or 9. I
Okay.
think we did two IVFs. Sorry, we did 2 inseminations at home. We did 3 IVF cycles. And then I think we did, yeah, 8 or 9. I mean, at the end I lost count. Eight or
Okay.
nine IVF cycles.
I'm just going to put this out here and then I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions because you didn't end up getting a viable, genetically healthy embryo. And there was a point where you were like, I need to move on with my life. And you have moved on and you are now a proud fur baby mama.
I sure am.
So, but I think what was very poignant as we were going through all of this, that you could see the improvements in every IVF cycle that you had so much intention with. And yet we couldn't get that genetically healthy embryo.
Yeah.
You tell me, how did you keep hanging on to hope? And how did you ride through the like, I have to get back on the horse, but
Yeah.
you had fallen off the horse. How did you get back on?
Yeah, I think that when we still had, we still had sperm from those first early rounds of IVF. I was just like, we've got it, right? Like we've got this. It's gonna happen on the first time. That's okay. I had a lot of good support. I had a lot of friends surrounding me with amazing support. I had you, I had a great fertility clinic, I had my wife. And we were just like committed. Like it's gonna happen. We're doing all the things. I think there was a piece of me that had some level of acceptance that was like, I know that my age is a factor, right? I know we started this late in life. There was a piece of acceptance that I needed to have, right? Like the more pressure I put on myself, the more stressed my body would be. And so I didn't want to be in that place. So there was some acceptance. There was also acceptance to the disappointment, right? There was just the grief was going to happen. It was going to happen. And it did happen. You know, getting those phone calls saying I don't have great news was always, I could just like feel my heart drop. And it got harder each cycle. It was like if you the moment you thought that that was the lowest that you're gonna feel, the next call was like, oh, dagger, you
Yeah.
know. But there was a piece of me that just knew that we had to keep going, that it wasn't the end yet. And I trusted that I would know when that point was. And so when we decided to get more sperm and kind of we had to wait and we had to get, it had to come out of its quarantine and storage. And there was just like the commitment. And I think that was right around the new year. And I decided that my word of the year was going to be surrender. I was going to surrender to the process. And I was going to whatever was meant to happen was going to happen. And I just kept going back to that. When I would get really, really hopeful, I never really wanted to let myself get so hopeful that I was like shopping for baby clothes, because then the disappointment would have been that much harder. But the surrender of like, I trust and believe that everything that I'm doing for myself is going to be enough if this soul is going to come into my life. And we did a lot of journaling. I journaled the whole process. I haven't been able to look at my journal yet, but I journaled every cycle. And I spoke to like the entity that would be my child and was like, we're ready for you. Like, however you're going to show up, we're ready for you. And I just surrendered. And that sustained me for a while. And like the love and the support of my friends and there was only one family member that knew and you, that was really helped me go. I think there was a point where I I think we were like the second to last round. And I didn't know it was going to be a last round, but that's where we were. We had two more vials of sperm left. And I was like, I could keep going, right? Like if we could find another donor, I could keep going, but do I want to? Can I continue to put myself through the heartache? Because it was a lot of heartache. And I think that as we got to that last round, and actually my last round was my best round.
I can remember it. I think you had an amazing response. You had a good number of eggs, was like 8 or 9 eggs that were growing.
Yeah.
And when you went to retrieval, it's like she got almost all of them. And I think almost all of them fertilized. It was the best.
The best cycle and the best graded embryos.
Yes. And I remember you had reached out to me and it's like, we have like a AAA
Yeah.
plus. And it was like, this is going to be it.
Yeah. It felt good. It was the first cycle that we did where we were waiting for the genetic testing to come back, and the fertility doctor was giving me the plan of what my transfer would be. So I was really hopeful. I was like more hopeful than I had ever been. I knew the grading, and I just was like, oh, this is it. And so when I got the phone call, it was probably like 2 days after we'd had the conversation about a transfer. When I got the phone call and she was like, okay, it wasn't this, but we'll just try again. And I remember, kind of being stunned and saying, well, we don't have any more sperm. And it was at that point that I had a conversation with my wife and I said, I don't think that I can go through this again. Like, I think that if we're going to go through anything, maybe we should look at embryo donation. Tossed that around for a while, and life circumstances started to shift. There was just a point where we realized, like, this isn't the path that our child is going to come to us through.
How old were you?
Yeah, I was 44.
Yeah.
I was 44.
You're just sort of a layperson watching this video.
Right.
That women and couples go on this journey for a long period of
A
time.
long time.
And it is mentally and emotionally wearing in a way,
When I started looking at, like getting pregnant at 40, right? Like 40, 41. And I was looking for support groups out there. They are all targeted towards cisgendered straight couples. And so a lot of the stories that I would hear, like the hopeful stories, were like, we went through 8 years of IVF and then we stopped and then we got pregnant naturally. Oh, I got pregnant naturally at 45. I got pregnant naturally at 48. And so, like, there was hope there, right? That I could get pregnant in my 40s, in my mid 40s even, but I didn't have unlimited access to sperm. And so, the conversation then becomes like, are we willing to completely drain our savings to have a child? I mean, we even contemplated, like, do we keep doing the genetic testing, or we just like get them in
I
and
was just
throw
going
them
to
in?
ask, because I'm sure there's somebody out there who is like, well, I would have just transferred, because there's a certain amount of debate about injuring the quality of the embryo, taking a cell out, and that, the genetic testing is not as accurate. Do you think that that's something you would have changed if you're looking back?
I don't think so. I think I thought about it. Especially that those last few cycles. I was like, why are we spending, $1,300 for them to be like, it's abnormal, or it's like it's missing a chromosome. I I at that point, like, I think that's where common sense starts to dissipate a little bit, because there's a little bit of desperation, right? Like, I wanted to be a mother so badly. I wanted to bring a child into this world so badly. I was willing to, like, save, a few $1,000s. The core of me, right? Like, my values were like, well, I don't also want to bring a child into this world that may suffer because I was being selfish, right? And so I
Yes.
wouldn't, if someone said, you know what, we've got the magic pill and you could do the IVF tomorrow, and I would still do the genetic testing. I think that in many ways it would have given me, had we, had a viable embryo and successfully gotten pregnant, I think it would have given me a lot of ease of mind, knowing that we had gone through that, especially because I was carrier for 4 genetic diseases. I would want that information.
If there's anything you could share to same-sex couples about your whole experience, what would you share?
I would say find any and all resources that are out there. There are resources out there. There's some great podcasts out there that were really helpful for me in the beginning in understanding what this process was like. Any books that are out there, there's not a lot, but there are a few. I would say, prepare ahead of time. Find the people that can rally around you, to support you through the ups and downs, and do the work and figuring out, how your partner can support you. Also finding a clinic that has, you know, has awareness that can answer some of these questions that, you know, the system was built to serve heterosexual couples. Finding the clinic that, you know, has more information, who can support you, who can help lay out all of your options and maybe like the best case scenario, and the different kind of stages that you might go through. I think that's really, I would say support is probably the biggest the
Okay.
biggest one. Finding somebody who understands, that you can talk to, that having a therapist that you can talk to.
Looking at giving up and moving on, what was that like?
You know, it kind of
It's
happened for us. You know, we got to this point. I was like, I need a break. I can't do this. I don't know if I want to continue to do this. Um, my wife and I hadn't even had a conversation about it, and then I got a job offer, and we moved, and I took this new job, and I was like, well, we're not gonna go through this right now because like we're in transition, right? And it just was like little by little this realization that, okay, I think we're giving, we're maybe not giving up, but that part of our dream has passed. And so we're going to move through, in a different way. And I think that the process is still happening. I think there's a lot of like grief, that hasn't been resolved. It's not been that long. It's been, I think, a year since my last retrieval. And it still comes up, right? Like there's still moments where I'm like, oh man, like, are we done? But yeah, we're done. We're
it's
done.
I mean, just you saying that, I had spoken to one of my old patients, whose cycle didn't last IVF cycle didn't work out, and she's like, there are just days I wake up and I go, is this really the last cycle? Should
Right,
I do another one? Should I
right.
plan in another 3 months? And then she's like, well, we don't really have the money. Where would we find the money and the time and the energy? And I can see like the similarity in the words of sort of, you're still working through, like, do you give up?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've just maybe like moved to the next chapter. You
Mhm.
know, I don't foresee myself going through any more cycles. Is is parenthood on the horizon in another way? Possibly, right? Like, do we have a home and love in our hearts to, you know, give to a child? Possibly, you know, perhaps. But I think at this moment, we're still in that process of just like accepting and moving through what this next chapter is, which right now is dog moms.
Mhm. Is there anything that you would want to talk about that I haven't asked about? Is there
I
any?
don't I don't think so. I mean, I would say that like really, I mean, I was so blessed to have been given your name and number and to have you through, you know, all of the cycles that we went through together, and not just for the needles and the moxibus, but for the conversation and the, you know, seeking to understand and the support and the love that you poured into me, and to Dina, right? Like we were so grateful to have this person who really understood the process that my body was going through, and who was just another cheerleader in our corner, you know, somebody to call and text when the cycle was done, and then to plan with for when we wanted to take the next step. It was a real blessing.
I will admit that I was very hopeful at that last cycle too. I don't talk about very much is that I get attached I spend enough time with my patients that I get attached and I want them to have babies.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes being in this business because you guys are amazing. And yeah, things,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was sad. I was sad.
It was sad.
Yeah.
It was sad. Yeah. I think be prepared for sad, right? Like that would be my advice.
Yeah.
Be
And I
prepared
think
for
that
happy and
first
be prepared for
IVF
sad.
cycle, it's like the way it appears from the outside feels like that first, like all you have to do is that cycle of IVF and it's going to resolve all your problems. You're going to have a baby. Everything's going to be great. And then the reality of the uncertainty, all the variables that no one can control get thrown into the mix of everything.
That's right. It is a practice in surrendering.
Totally. Totally. And if you ever figure it out, Kate, bottle it and sell it to me.
Okay.
I have my own surrendering issues, so yeah. Well, I appreciate you spending time with me today. So thank you. And it was wonderful talking.